It doesn't matter what part of the country you're from, all Americans are feeling the impact of rising costs.
It is hitting the middle class, the low-income families the hardest, and it is causing politicians and experts in Washington to be at odds. So Erie News Now Washington, D.C. correspondent Brendan Scanlon is joining us live tonight from Capitol Hill with more details, especially from one Pennsylvania politician. Brendan, good evening.
That's right. Good evening, Mike and Eva. That Pennsylvania politician is Senator Bob Casey, who released a report this morning which he says exposes big corporations for price gouging, or as he calls greedflation. We also spoke with a policy expert who said that too much government spending is to blame.
Everywhere I go, it's probably the #1 issue I hear about.
Pennsylvania Senator Bob Casey says food, gasoline, and utility bills are just a few things that have increased as profits for big corporations have skyrocketed. He calls it greedflation.
Meaning that major corporations are using inflation as a cover to jack up their prices that hit consumers really hard, especially families raising children.
According to Casey's report, greedflation cost the average Pennsylvania family an extra $3,000 in 2021 and more than $3,500 in 2022.
And we can't allow them to do this. We've got to take them on. We can't just throw up our hands and say, well, that's the nature of our system. This isn't capitalism. This is a perversion of capitalism.
Others say the government is to blame.
The government creates inflation when it spends too much and borrows too much, specifically when the borrowing is so great that the Federal Reserve needs to buy it, and by buying it, they expand the money supply.
Kurt Couchman with Americans for Prosperity says the answer is broad-based economic growth with less barriers and more competition.
You want to eliminate government-imposed barriers to competition so that if one company is doing something that just isn't right, then somebody else can come in and take market share from them by providing a better service at a more affordable cost.
Casey agrees competition is necessary, but he also believes in more disposable income for working families and holding big corporations accountable.
If that means an excess profits tax on oil companies, if that means extra pieces of legislation and policy to stop any kind of food manufacturer from jacking up their prices, we got to take those actions.
Now, one way Senator Casey and other Democrats want to help working class families is through programs like the Child Tax Credit. That program provided monthly payments to working class families to help afford child care, school supplies, rent, and a whole host of other things. But that, of course, comes at a cost. And the other side of the argument here, remember, is that it's that overspending, that borrowing that brought us in this situation in the first place. Mike, Eva?